Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the latest G7 summit, its highlights, and the joint statement made by the participant countries. We also take a quick look at a new COVID-19 variant called Delta Plus. But first, we talk about Covaxin, the indigenously developed COVID-19 vaccine, which is being used in India's inoculation drive. Recently, the US Food and Drug Administration, that is the FDA, decided not to approve the vaccine for emergency use authorization. Because of this, many people have raised concerns and doubts about the vaccine. Many have questioned, what is wrong with Covaxin? Why has the FDA given emergency use authorization to Pfizer and Moderna, but not Covaxin? In this segment, Prabha Raghavan, who reports on pharma for the Indian Express, joins us to talk about the reason why the FDA did this.
Okay, well, to start with, let's add a little bit of context so that it's easier for everyone to understand. So, what has actually happened is that Bharat Biotech's partner in the United States, known as Ocugen, it was supposed to be submitting an application for emergency use authorization over there. What ended up happening was they submitted something known as a master file, which includes certain bits of information about the product and the process for manufacturing and everything. And the US Food and Drug Regulator, the US FDA, looked at that information and told the company that instead of submitting an application for an EUA, what you should instead do is submit an application for full authorization instead. And this full authorization application is known as a biologics license application. And that's something that you see companies do in the normal course of events when there is no emergency situation involved.
So this would be done when there is not a pandemic going on, or at least when cases aren't surging. That's when you would want a regular procedure to take place. And a regular procedure like this one would require a company to submit more details about the vaccine trials and testing, and would also require more checks to be done by the FDA. And Prabha says that that's what the FDA has asked Bharat Biotech's partner to do even before it submitted its application for the emergency use approval.
So what that means is that in some way, yes, the US FDA has rejected the possibility of giving an EUA, but it also means that the US FDA hasn't really taken a call on the vaccine as such, because there has been no application submitted. They've preemptively said, don't submit an EUA, come to us with a BLA instead, come to us with a full authorization application instead. So they're not saying no to the vaccine. They're saying, we'll just need you to work harder to get the approval instead. They haven't flagged any issues per se.
Now let's talk about why the US wants Covaxin to take the regular approach for approval. Prabha says that there are multiple reasons behind it. One is that the US no longer needs more vaccines approved in an emergency situation. They already have 3 vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, in sufficient quantities. And they have also vaccinated a significant percentage of the population. So much so that they are now planning to supply vaccines to the rest of the world. This is why Prabha says they can afford to use the regular process for vaccine approval rather than the emergency one. And even besides this, the reason why Covaxin has been asked to take the regular approval process are the recent changes to the FDA guidelines.
In this new guidance, they've said that it may decline to review and process EUA requests in cases where it's not feasible for the FDA to verify the conduct of the clinical trials, the integrity of the clinical trial data, and the standards that the manufacturing facility of that vaccine follow. And so that's something that we should keep in mind. The fact that Covaxin is a vaccine that has been fully tested in India on the Indian population as per the Indian regulator standards, And it's also a vaccine that is being manufactured in India in manufacturing facilities that have not been approved by the US FDA or have in facilities that haven't really been checked by the US FDA, and in a population that doesn't really include Caucasian people. And so what that does is when companies like Ocugen come forward with data for Covaxin to seek an EUA, they're mostly going to be submitting data from India. And this is information that the FDA doesn't really think is feasible for it at this point in time to sit and verify.
Plus, Prabha points out that the FDA has said that they will give priority to vaccine candidates where developers have engaged with the FDA throughout the development process, something that Pfizer and Moderna have done. That's why they got approval faster. FDA, in their cases, knew more about how the trials were conducted, for example.
And I think that's an important point to look at. So basically, on the one hand, the United States is no longer in a situation where it needs more vaccines on an urgent basis because they have sufficient supply for their own population and enough supply to even start providing to the rest of the world. And on the other, they're trying to be more cautious about the kinds of vaccines that they approve in terms of how well they know these vaccines and how they've been developed and tested. And so possibly we might see more vaccines get EUA in the US, but they might come from developers that have constantly been in touch with the US FDA throughout the process of testing and development and collection analysis of the data that has been provided to them for an EUA application.
And the important thing to note here is that just because it is not getting an emergency use authorization by the FDA does not mean that there is anything wrong with Covaxin. What FDA is really asking Bharat Biotech and Ocugen to do is just conduct additional tests and provide more data, which, like mentioned earlier, is required for the regular approval process. And Prabha points out that it is a vaccine that has been developed and tested in the Indian population.
So that means Bharat Biotech, along with the Indian Council of Medical Research in India, had started phase 1 and 2 trials last year. They'd completed that. Some of that information has been published. There has been information about the ability of this vaccine to protect against some of the variants that have been published on preprint servers, which means that it's information that is available for the public to see, but has not been peer reviewed by other scientific experts. And then we've also seen phase 3 trials of this vaccine conducted in India on about 25,800 participants. And while there has been constant controversy surrounding Covaxin and, I guess, arguments of lack of transparency surrounding the information about this vaccine, there have been tests conducted, and there are papers and scientific studies and analyses of this vaccine that are slowly coming out and being published. The government has said that it expects the efficacy data of this vaccine to be published in the next week or so. The management of Bharat Biotech has also said that they expect information about the efficacy of this vaccine, the final information, including a follow-up on the safety of this vaccine, to be immediately put up on a preprint server in July, as soon as they go to the Indian regulator with all of this information. And so we know that there has been testing of this vaccine. We know that it is safe to use in the Indian population. It has been approved in India for a mass population to use. And so far, we're also getting some follow-up information on it. So just because the US FDA says we want you to do additional trials and we want you to go for a full authorization process, that doesn't necessarily mean that there is something wrong with this vaccine.
And Covaxin is also looking to get on the WHO's emergency use listing. Does the FDA's decision in any way affect that?
This isn't expected to have any bearing on the WHO EUL process because the World Health Organization, it independently reviews the information that is submitted from trials of vaccines. They don't necessarily look towards specific regulators and say only if you've got a regulatory approval from, say, US FDA or from the UK MHRA for this vaccine can you come to us with your information. What they say is that your vaccine needs to have gone through phase 2B and phase 3 clinical trials, and it needs to have been approved by the reference national regulatory authority of that country. So in this case, for Covaxin, the NRA would be the CDSCO. And if you fulfilled those requirements, you can come to us with your dossier, with all of the information from the trials, and you can submit it to us and we will sit down to review it. And that's basically what Bharat Biotech has done. So the US FDA's decision, Covaxin, doesn't really have a bearing on the WHO's decision to review or not review this vaccine. And right now, what Bharat Biotech expects is that the review process will take a couple of months and that they will get a WHO EUL sometime between July and September this year.
Also, the other concern that people had was about traveling. If someone has taken Covaxin, can they face restrictions while going to the US?
No, because right now, first of all, at the moment, there are restrictions on most people from India traveling to the United States anyway. But there are some groups and segments of the population that can travel to the United States under specific circumstances. And some of these groups include students who will be starting university in the fall. And what students have been told, or what people who need to travel to the United States and are approved to travel to the United States have been told, is that you need to basically, while boarding your flight, show a negative RT-PCR test. And then universities have their own specific requirements for immunization, which include you need to have been fully vaccinated with an approved COVID vaccine. And what this would mean would be you need to either have a vaccine that was approved by the US FDA or a vaccine that has a WHO EUL. If you do not have either of those vaccines, then what that means is maybe the university will give you an option to restart your vaccination. So if you have been vaccinated with Covaxin and you are approved to travel to the United States, say for something like attending university in the fall, you need to check with your university and ask them, well, I have Covaxin. Is that going to be approved at your university? And if it isn't, what are my options? And most likely they will say, well, we have these other vaccines available. And since Covaxin isn't approved by either the US FDA at this moment or the WHO, you restart your vaccination once you come to the United States and once you quarantine for about 7 days.
And while we're talking about Covaxin and its efficacy, do we know how effective it is against the beta and delta variants?
So there was a preprint study, again, this is non-peer reviewed, that was published recently where the company said that Covaxin has some level of effectiveness against variants like the Delta variant, which is becoming the dominant variant in India, and it's becoming a variant of concern over here. But at the same time, the level of protection that Covaxin provides against this variant is less than what it does against the original strain. And that's something that we've seen with most of the vaccines that are available against COVID.
And next we talk about the G7 summit. The G7, or Group of Seven, is an intergovernmental organization made up of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. It is a forum where these countries come together to discuss and find solutions to some of the world's most pressing issues. Countries like India have in the past been invited as guest countries. G7's latest summit took place over the weekend, and India was once again invited as a guest along with South Korea, Australia, and South Africa. This was G7's first in person meet since 2019. However, India participated in it only virtually. During the summit, the countries discussed the issues related to the pandemic and also discussed and made joint statements regarding China and freedom of speech. In this segment, Indian Express's associate editor Shubhajit Roy, who reports on matters of foreign affairs, joins us to share the highlights of the meet. And he begins by telling us what was discussed during it.
Well, the discussion was obviously on regarding the pandemic, on the post-pandemic recovery, economic recovery, vaccines, and how to deal with future pandemics as well. In that sense, it also talked about global governance, health governance, because there are a couple of issues that have come out. For example, China, how it handled the initial stages, the COVID outbreak, and there's been a WHO study, and there is a demand, including India's demand, that there should be a follow up to that study, a transparent investigation into the origins of COVID-19 outbreak. And also, there is other issues related to the WHO's leadership, which has been far from satisfactory in the last year and a half as the pandemic has sort of engulfed the entire globe.
Apart from this, of course, the countries discussed and debated the concerns around COVID-19 vaccines. Shubhajit says that PM Narendra Modi had addressed 3 sessions, and in one of the sessions, he talked about the opening up of vaccine chains, essentially asking countries to lift restrictions on export of critical raw materials to help enhance vaccine production,
which received widespread support, as we understand from Indian government officials who privy to the discussions in the meeting. This also came, like, for example, a day or two after French President Emmanuel Macron, he supported India's demand for lifting restrictions on export of raw materials needed to manufacture vaccines. As you know, US had also said, it was last week when it said that it was going to lift the curbs, ease the curbs for supply of raw materials. So, in that sense, it was a very important point of discussion. In that, Prime Minister Modi also sought the G7 support for a proposal moved by India and South Africa at the World Trade Organization for a TRIPS waiver on COVID related technologies. Now, we understand that Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison was among the leaders who came out strongly in support of this. So, all in all, India's position was laid out where India positioned itself as a manufacturer of vaccines as a global good, as a global need, and which would benefit India, of course, and also the rest of the world, and from developing countries to developed countries, all of them would benefit. So, in that sense, on Saturday, the G7 leaders were discussing the 100 days mission, which they agreed on, an ambitious mission to have safe and effective vaccines within 100 days of a future pandemic threat. So, these are some of the broad issues related to the pandemic and the possible future pandemic that was discussed during the G7 summit.
And Shubhajit, COVID-19 was, of course, a big issue, but this summit happened at a time when the US, UK, and India are seeing China as a major strategic rival. So, what statements did we see come out regarding China?
So, China obviously has emerged as a strategic rival for the G7, and the Biden administration had put that front and center, taking sort of policies developed by the Trump administration forward. Now, in this G7 meeting, the joint statement that came out by the G7 leaders, which did not include India or other guest countries, it came out very strongly on China's behavior. For example, China's behavior on in the South China Sea, where it's trying to unilaterally change the status quo. There was a paragraph on that. Then there were references to China's human rights record and human rights violations in Xinjiang province that was another issue that was mentioned specifically in the G7 joint statement. Also, the COVID 19 outbreak and the WHO study to find out the COVID 19 origin as this lab leak theory gains ground, there has been call for more transparent, more timely investigation into that. So that is another thing that was flagged in the joint statement. So overall, I think China as a strategic threat, and not just overall generic statement was made, but on issue wise, on three or four issues, China was named, and there was strong language, which is quite new in terms of when you look at past G7 statements, the way they have been drafted or crafted. And this time, the language was much more stronger in terms of when it talked about China. And this clearly positions the G7 vis-a-vis China, and obviously that is one of the big takeaways from this particular summit meeting.
And now, apart from this, on Sunday, there was another joint statement that was signed by the G7 and the guest countries, including India, that talked about safeguarding democracies by encouraging the values of, quote, freedom of expression, both online and offline, unquote. This statement, you write, also refers to politically motivated internet shutdowns as one of the threats to freedom and democracy. Now, India is a country that has been accused of curbing freedom of speech. India has also had one of the highest number of internet shutdowns in the world. So did we see India expressing any concerns around this statement? And by signing this joint statement, what kind of pressure does this put on India, if any?
Yeah, so if you have to understand this particular statement, it's a very interesting statement. A statement on open societies is the first time the G7 and the guest countries have developed a document, have come out with a document on open societies that, as you rightly pointed out, reaffirmed and encouraged the values of what they call freedom of expression, both online and offline, as a freedom that safeguards democracy and helps people live free from fear and oppression. Now, you have to understand the G7 countries are countries which are world's most advanced economies, Western economies, and they're all democracies. And when they invited four more countries, they were all, including India, Australia, South Korea, and South Africa. These are all democracies. So, in fact, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson referred to these 11 countries as Democracies 11, which essentially coalition of democracies across the world. Now, when you talk of democracies, without India, coalition of democracies wouldn't mean much because India is obviously world's largest democracy. So this is again a sort of a nuance or a not so subtle message to China, as I would say. And it talked about the values that are very dear or close to the democratic countries, democratic societies. And although it is targeted or directed at China as well as Russia and other such non democratic societies or countries or governments, but India has also, as you rightly pointed out, has been under scrutiny from the world on its implementation of democratic rights. So in India, there have been internet shutdowns in Kashmir or during the protests, say, for example, 26th January this year, or on several other occasions. And this has happened in the last few years. Also, it has happened earlier as well. So, by getting India to sign on it means gives a signal that India has committed to these principles, these shared values of democracy, of these principles. And that, I think, is a commitment that India has to adhere to. Because if India wants to take on China and if it wants the world's biggest democracies and the most advanced economies on its side when it takes on China, it has to have that shared values with these G7 countries.
Though, when he spoke to officials about this, they told him that India has used internet shutdowns when it comes to law and order situations that could lead to violence. And they said that those are the cases where even countries in the West have done internet shutdowns.
If you look at the Capitol Hill incident on January 6th this year, there also the internet was shut down. And it was that kind of a concern has been there in a shared concern has been there, even in developing or developed countries. So that has been a point of reservation initially. So India had flagged through its external affairs minister, who had joined in the G7 foreign ministers meeting, when he had talked about this in May in London, if you remember, when External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, he had gone there and said that open societies and personal freedoms require careful nurturing, and they must be on guard against fake news and digital manipulation. But Indian government officials have told me that India doesn't have any reservations on the final joint statement, and because it has signed off on it. And they also said that while the statement is directed at China and Russia, the situation in India was not discussed at this particular G7 summit. So, in a sense, although the situation was not discussed, but India, by signing off to the statement, has committed to giving a much more freer space for civil society and upholding the human rights for all, both online and offline.
And in the end, we talk about a new COVID-19 variant. Over the past few weeks, we have come to know about B16172, or the Delta variant. This variant has been recognized as a variant of concern by the WHO. The Delta variant is known to be more transmissible, and some vaccines are not as effective against it. It has also been associated with outbreaks in a number of different countries. For example, in India, it was to a large extent responsible for the surge in cases in Delhi in April. But now, this variant has mutated further to form Delta Plus, or AY1 variant. Though scientists claim that there is no indication yet of the severity of the disease due to the new variant, they also add that there is no immediate concern for India as its incidence in the country is still low. The Delta Plus variant is categorized by the acquisition of K417N mutation. Experts say that SARS-CoV-2 has a nearly constant rate of acquiring genetic variants, and each variant has acquired additional variants in a stepwise fashion, adding that the understanding of this continued evolution is of great importance in mapping the evolutionary landscape of emerging variants. You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.